Dr. Vicki Wright Hamilton, and welcome to Ignite. Are you ready to spark your passion and fuel your leadership journey? This is where ambition meets transformation, and it begins. Let's light that fire and keep it burning. And today, I am so excited. I get one of my guests back again. It's one of my favorite guests. Elanna Reese, who's going to be with us to tell us more about leadership and helping us to move forward. Welcome, Elanna.
Thank you, Vicki. I'm so happy to see you again.
I am happy to have you. So glad you're here. How are things going?
Things are going pretty well, pretty well. There's a lot going on out there in the world. It's hard to
Yes,
keep up with some things.
yes.
And I thought maybe today we could talk a little bit about side gigs or pivoting because I think it would be relevant for a lot of your viewers.
Absolutely. And I think that with all that's happening in the world, everything that we're getting exposed to, the uncertainty, the not knowing, people are trying to understand about jobs or losing jobs or side gigs or how do I do both to protect myself? Retirement's going away, not seeing numbers where they were because of stock markets going down. How do we respond? How do we protect ourselves?
Yeah,
So let's
there.
talk about that a little bit. I would love to get your perspective. When you think about pivoting, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, that's a huge question, right? Not just the pivot part, but all of what's going on. I think there's not one specific answer for that. But in terms of pivoting, if I may, I want to tell you a little story.
Sure.
Great, awesome. In 2017, I was in my corporate job and I was in a meeting with a colleague and my phone rang. And I don't normally answer the phone when I'm working unless it's sort of like the school nurse. And usually you get that call and you hear, "Oh, I have your child, they're fine," and blah, 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 blah. So I answer the phone and I got, "Oh, I have your child." And that millisecond before she's fine lasted for maybe a minute in my head because I didn't hear she's fine. I heard she's injured and you need to come get her immediately. And so I apologized. I stopped my meeting. I came back the next day to complete the meeting. And over the next couple of weeks, my daughter had a severe concussion. And over the next couple of weeks, I had to make some adjustments. I had some help at home. I had to leave work earlier a couple of days to support and relieve my help. And a few weeks later, I'm standing next to some of my colleagues in the cubicles. And one of them very loudly says, it's about 5 o'clock. He says, "Oh, I have to leave early today because Alana's daughter had a concussion." And all these people around him start, snickering. And my boss, who is standing there, says absolutely nothing. For me, that was a moment, that was a catalyst, a catalytic moment where I said, this is not an environment that is conducive to my success anymore. This
Mhm.
this isn't going to work for me. And it was pivotal because it gave me the runway to start to figure out what can I do next because this is not going to be a long-term solution for me. Not
Mhm.
only that there was a little bit of mockery, but
Mhm.
that the management was silent.
Yeah.
Was really disappointing is what happened. But I say that because I pivoted. And when you have a moment that makes you pivot, whether it's intentional or something happens that's unintentional or unexpected, it's a really good time to assess and evaluate what do you want to do next? What does success look like to you? And how can you find it in an alternate path? Something different from what you were doing before. There are so many pathways. We just don't always know what they are.
Mhm. And Elena, you're bringing up a very good point. I can't tell you the number of, women leaders that I coach and talk to. And first of all, I want to commend you for the courage. It takes courage to really recognize an introspection. I need to move on. This is
Mhm.
not conducive for me. The second thing is timing. How long do I stay? How long do I allow this to go on? Do I just quit and leave? Do I not? And can I afford to just quit and leave? And when you find yourself in that position that I can't afford to, but I have to put up with this a little bit longer. Having the stamina to do that, knowing that your aspirations are to go somewhere else, right? Is to get out of that environment, but keeping your self care and mindset enough to the point to say, I'm going to stay here until I get something else because I can't put my family at that risk. Understanding what kind of environment you're in.
Mhm.
And so I think that it's also important that as we talk about the courage and recognizing, let's talk a little bit about the stamina to stay until that point. So I'm curious,
Mm.
how long were you having to stay in that environment before you were able to pivot to say this is no longer a environment for me?
Yeah, I usually jump a little sooner than other people. That's just who I am. I did stay for probably about 6 more months, which I felt like was an eternity at that moment. Like the moment I knew that this was not going to be a long-term solution,
Hmm.
6 months felt like forever. But in that time frame, what can one do? What did I do is I looked to pivot thinking maybe this isn't the function for me versus the company. And that's not always the case.
Hmm.
Sometimes you are doing the thing that is the right thing for you, you're just not in the right environment.
Right.
And I wasn't sure. I didn't have good guidance at that time to figure out what would be the best path for me.
Hmm.
It did give me time to figure out what I'm good at and what I enjoy, and ultimately leave to be able to start consulting and doing that on my own. And that was a great way for me to pivot and get set up in that area. But I like to work with people and help them identify, is your need to leave or pivot, is your need to pivot based on who you're working for or what you're doing? Because
Hmm.
those could be really different outcomes. If you love what you're doing, but you don't love who you're doing it for, you can do the same thing elsewhere.
Hmm.
And conversely, if you love who you're working with and who you're doing it for, but maybe you're not thriving in the function, you might be able to pivot internally and
Hmm.
find another function at the same company. So that's something I like to always take a hard look at. I didn't take as hard a look at that as I like to have other people do. But along those lines, also, Vicky, you and I have talked a lot about having side gigs and
Right.
getting started on that yesterday, right? Like do something you love on the side anyway, and
Mhm.
maybe it can lead to something profitable. Maybe it can lead to something full time, or maybe just it can lead to something that you really enjoy.
And when you think about that, Elena, it's I know that, I found myself in environments where it was like, okay, I can't do this passive aggressive thing. This is not me. This is the culture. This is how the company is. And I just wanted to run. But what I learned is that there were a lot of environments that were passive aggressive that operated the same way. So I had to determine, how is I going to thrive and do what I enjoy doing and not let the environment control me.
Hmm.
And so one of the things I've always said is I've never had a job. I always got paid to have fun because I loved the function of what I was doing. I actually loved the job, but I had to adapt to the environment at times because it wasn't the most inviting or rewarding environment. But I love what I did so much, I didn't want to let it go, right?
Hmm.
I love the people on my team. I love what I was doing. It was just the outside noise and politics and all that kind of stuff that went on that I didn't love. So I found coping mechanisms to deal with that, to stay in the joy of my heart of what I love to do. And that's not easy to do, but it has to be something that you self determine that that's what you're going to do. And when you find yourself in a position where you can't leave, right, and you have to make it work, that's when you're really in that position to be able to say, I have to make this decision, but do what's best for my family in that perspective. And talking about having a job to the side, in this day and age, I think everybody ought to sit down, write down, if I were rich and money was not an issue, what would I do just to have fun? What would I do just to enjoy life? And what we can be surprised about is that joy or that fun can actually be a profitable business, right?
100%, 100%. And kudos to you because I think you just did something that is exactly that. You have this passion, this side project that you've now brought to light. And I know it's my interview, but I want to interview you a little bit on it because it sounds to me like something so valuable and so important as we look to, and we've talked about this before, like the dash before you die.
Right,
What do you want to achieve? What do you want to
right.
accomplish? What's important to you? What do you want to bring forth? And I think you just did something that speaks
Well,
to that.
it's interesting. And a 30-second backdrop to that is when I was a child, I wanted to be an actress. And I wanted to be on screen. And I was a plump little girl. And my daddy said they don't put fat people on screens, and they surely don't put black fat people on screens. Go use your brain that God gave you and go earn some real money and don't be a starving artist. So I did what daddy told me to do, went to school, got a degree, etc. But I always loved the entertainment, and I was in entertainment and cable for years. But I have a passion for working with communities, and as being a previous single mom and raising, two sons and all of that, I had a passion of working with single mothers, and I'm part of a program where I had the opportunity to actually coach and mentor these single mothers through this program in Women in Technology, which I've been a part of for like 28 years. And so through doing that, I had an opportunity to create a documentary. And I said, it's time for these stories to be told. These are strong women. They have been through things you cannot imagine. And it's time for the story to be told. So I am the executive producer and director of the Diary of Successful Black Single Mothers. And it actually launched on March 20th at the Regal Theaters in Atlanta, Georgia, at the Atlantic Station. And it was a dream come true. I looked up on the screen and saw my vision and said, you know what, Lord? I thank you for letting the vision come alive. But just importantly, I thank you for giving me the stamina and the courage, not only to find these women and have them give their stories, but to create an anthology book that goes along with it so that they can be authors. So it's not just about being in a documentary, it's about you can be a speaker, you can get on podcasts. You are building a platform for yourself to continue to aspire. So thanks for asking about that. We're going to take a station break and we'll be right back.